Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of the FridgeCast. Today, we're going to be talking about something very interesting: Smite mid-season update. We are obviously big Smite fans. Been playing for 7 years now, I believe. Apparently, the way they're going to be doing it with this new style of bonus updates, there's going to be two. So we have the mid-season update, which already dropped on July 12th, which is already out by now. We've played about a game or two at least, but we're waiting for more games to get a real judgment on it. But yes, it's going to be split up into two bonus updates. First of which is going to be dropping on July 26th, and then the next on August 9th. Now, this is pretty much, so I believe at least, they're going to be doing it this way so they can split up the balance because they're adding a lot of items, new glyph changes, and I feel like it's just easier for them to put it out in these bonus updates, which is more common and faster than the typical release schedule is all. Anyways, we have a Nickelodeon event in Smite. We have some interesting skins for Freya, Gilgamesh, Cupid, Tanzaburo, and Giannis. And of which Freya has XJ9, Gilgamesh has Powered Toastman, Cupid has Invader Zim, Tanzaburo has Rocco, and my personal favorite, Danny Phantom for Giannis. I think they all look good. I think the only one I don't really care for is the Gilgamesh skin, just because I don't know who Powered Toastman is. I've heard of him. I
I
just
know
don't
he's
know what he's from.
from Ren and Stimpy, but I don't know what from exactly.
And obviously, in this event, there's multiple cosmetics like announcer packs, avatars, emotes, jump stamps, and even more like loan screens. Anyways, next we do have the Zodiac Council Battle Pass, which is quite a fit for Smite, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, I'd say I like this a lot better than the Nickelodeon, purely because I care the aesthetic matching with Smite, and to me, the bright, vibrant cartoon doesn't quite mesh as well as a darker, more detailed skin.
And you said earlier that your favorite is the Heimdallr skin, right?
Yep.
Which is interesting because it's just a recolor of a skin here I had,
I
which
know,
is the
but I think I like the dark royal
Valhalla.
purple a little bit more.
I personally say my favorite is either the Charybdis or the Nemesis skin, which is the first in the Battle Pass, I believe. Next, there's a bunch of things there, but it's pretty much your typical Battle Pass is all. We got Heimdallr has a skin, Nemesis, Estet, Charybdis, all good skins. I don't think anyone's going to really complain about them. And next, we're going to move on to the quality of life section for the patch. Now, these are kind of interesting, but we're just going to go by them real quick because it's not that much to talk about. So, there's going to be new free gods to newer players, which I think is good. The game's been out 9 years now. So, the new gods for new players is going to be Bacchus, Chalk, Izanami, Poseidon, and
Well,
Thanatos.
okay, you should probably reword that because it's not so much that they're getting new gods, it's that they're switching older, in my opinion, less effective gods for more better gods, in my opinion. Because Artemis is switching for Izanami, Ares is switching for Bacchus, Guan Yu is switching for Chalk, Ra is switching for Poseidon, and Thor is switching for Thanatos. And every single one of those gods, I would say, is an upgrade, except maybe Artemis.
Okay. Yeah, I do kind of wear that wrong. You're right. And that changes the new free god lineup is from Bacchus, Bologna, Chalk, Izanami, Kukulin, Neith, Oleron, Nemesis, Poseidon, Thanatos, Yamoja, and Ymir. Which, yes, I do definitely agree. Most of these replacements for such gods is much better replacements. And I think some of them deserve to be free. I'm kind of surprised Yamoja's already free.
Yamoja and Oleron are the two that stand out as that's weird.
Yeah, and I think they're putting Oleron and Yamoja on there because like out of that entire list of the free god lineup, they're the most interested in my opinion.
Yeah.
Anyways, after that we have finally tier 2 skins will be available for favor now. They will still be priced at 250 gems, but now You can buy a tier 2 skin for 25,000 favor. I'm just happy this gives us favor stackers who just have like hundreds of thousands. I believe I have like 400,000, 300,000, something like that on my account. But it finally gives us something to do with it. Any tier 2 skin, 25,000 favor.
Any tier
I know
two,
you're a big fan of that.
excluding like Jingten and Thor's two skins.
Right. And I know you're a big fan of that because you're always saying how favor needs to be added
How
into
favor
more
has to have a
things
point.
to be used at least. Yeah.
Because if you don't like the mastery skins, which most of them are pretty ass, then you just have no reason to spend a favor.
And like you said, the two skins that aren't is Tire Monster Jing 10 and Iron Gamer Thor. But what I don't understand is why these are so high. The 5 shadow skins in Smite that were clan exclusives are now going to be priced at 500 gems or 50,000 favor for direct purchase moving forward.
Yeah,
And that is
which I have
sorry, go
two
on.
problems with. One, these skins are basically recolors; they're not worth 50,000 favor or 500 gems. And two, the whole reason that they were cool and is it's an exclusive, something that takes a long time to do, and they just took it all out, and now it's just like, oh yeah, you can buy it. So it's like, stop doing that. It's stupid.
And I
As
mean
much as
the
I hate to say it, but same with all the battle passes. It's like, no, you shouldn't be able to buy skins from battle passes or events once they're gone. They should be exclusive. As much as that's gonna piss some people off, I'm like, I'm sorry. If you didn't play, then you don't get the skin.
yeah, and my biggest problem with it, not as much as yours, but 500 gems or 50,000 favor. 50,000 favor sounds small to some people from how much you just play and get favor,
Oh yeah, 100 a
but
match.
you have to, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the problem. If they're gonna keep introducing ways for us to spend our favor, they did in the last couple patches now. But not 500, 50,000 is ridiculous for these skins. I kind of think the 25,000 for the tier twos is okay because, like you said, tier two skins add a bit of character to the god. You know, there's actually armor on some of them. You know, they actually look different. And sure, you could probably say, oh well, on her Iset, Khepri, Thor, Tyr, all these shadow skins, they are different because they're shadows and they kind of have this like effect around them in the game. If you want to argue that, good for you, but they are just recolors at the end of the day, and that price is way too high for them. Next would be bugs fixes. Not a lot here to go over, but Lancelot, obviously being the new addition in Smite lineup, has quite a bit. I'll just go through these real quick so we can move on to the actual update, which has all the juicy stuff. So, first couple issues is fix an issue where his stuns weren't knocking him off of his mount. I mean, I could definitely see how that's frustrating as his mount is almost vital to his kit. Fix an issue where he was targetable by Freya while he wasn't mounted. Fix an issue where Pridewind's shield explosion wasn't proccing after his ult. On an issue where Nox couldn't exit shadow form while he was unmounted.
That doesn't surprise me.
Honestly, depends on who you ask. I think that's actually a good thing for Nox. Fix the description with his mount up ability, missing a word in the last sentence. I mean, sure, whatever. And then fix an issue where his model would glitch when being pushed or pulled by certain gods. That was kind of big because I got pulled a couple times by Sylvanas, and I noticed my character model in game bugged out. So I think that's actually a big one. We're gonna move on to the balance with 9.7 update. And I think the first thing we got to talk about is the brawling mechanic. It is the global anti-heal buff when you're not in combat. The time until brawling applies out of god combat is increased from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. Essentially meaning that if you're trying to heal out of combat, this will last longer when you get out of a fight initially. So you won't be healing as much from obviously 3 seconds to 5. You can definitely see how. I think it incentivizes less fighting in like the very start of like a conquest match. For instance, you know, if you're going to try to invade, which I don't think is popular at all anymore. It was way more back then for sure. But I think with the Brawl and Adjust, I don't see invades being popular at all anymore.
I can't really think of a time they ever were popular. I mean, they've always been a thing, but I mean, how many times out of 100 matches do you really see an invade happening?
Well, that's the thing. It happened in later season or earlier seasons, so I haven't
Still,
seen the last two. But yeah.
exactly, like it's been a long time since that's been.
And do you want to start with the new glyphs, my guy?
New glyphs, particularly glyphs, I am somewhat against in execution. I just don't think we needed a fourth tier items. I think what would have been better is just new or different items, personally. But that's beside the point.
We do get this patch, by the way.
Still, yeah, I'm just behind the whole tier 4 items, I guess. It doesn't really bother me in execution. It's just like seems like an unneeded thing where we could have just added in a new item to the tree or new item trees and it would have been accomplished the same thing. But I do understand because some of these have more powerful passives, but I wouldn't consider them.
That's a big upgrade, yeah.
But yeah, so we'll go through them all. Jotun's Vigor is unchanged. However, Jotun's Cunning now, every time you damage an enemy god with an ability, you gain a stack of Wit. At 2 stacks, your next non-ability that damages an enemy god gets 25% of its cooldown instantly refunded, which is going to be huge for ability-based assassins particularly.
Yeah, I see a lot, and I mean a lot of ability assassins coming back into play. Especially in jungle, this is going to be really good.
Yeah. Next, we'll go to Rod of Tahuti. Calamitous Rod of Tahuti is unchanged. The other one, which I think we all saw coming, because I can't think of anyone that built it aside from, well, me, is now Perfected Rod of Tahuti. Successfully damaging an enemy god with an ability applies a mark for 3 seconds, damaging them a second time with another ability, consumes the mark and provides you 10% movement speed for 2 seconds and reduces your non-ultimate ability by 1.5 seconds. Only one mark can be active at a time and cannot be applied for 10 seconds after consuming the mark.
And I mean, I think the big thing is once you consume it, after you hit them a second time, you do get a movement speed buff for 2 seconds, which is always good. I'll take the next one, actually. We have Bancroft's Talon is now getting 2 upgrades and the glyph treatment. And I think these two are actually very interesting. So we have Nimble Bancroft's Talon, which was what the Rod of Tahuti was getting replaced with. See, I think it makes more sense on Bancroft's Talon, though, and I'll get to that in a second.
I would say it makes more sense, and it's probably going to be a much wider used item. But that other Rod of Tahuti, I can't think of the name now off the top of my head. But for the
Nimble Rod of Tahuti.
Thank you, Nimble Rod of Tahuti.
Yep. Yeah, so essentially, like we said, this is inherited Nimble Rod of Tahuti, but in the Bancroft's tree. For every 40 magical power you have, you gain 2% attack speed. Literally the same exact thing, maybe.
It's a little different, but it's close enough to where it's a little less base power for a little bit more added power, I think. I don't remember exactly. It's not quite as powerful. It's kind of like a nerfed Nimble Rod, but it has lifesteal, so.
Right, I think, like I said, I believe this is going to be built a lot, especially with mage ADCs. And I said this in my video a bunch. I believe with certain items and certain glyphs, we're going to see a lot of Soul, Freya, Oleron, Chronos. Any mage ADC, I think, is going to get a big buff this patch because of Nimble Bancroft's Talon. A lot of them can use it well. But even for those non-mage ADCs, we have Bancroft's Talon, which is every 15 seconds you gain a stack of Hunger. Abilities cast within 30 units of enemy gods consume a stack, dealing bonus damage of equal to 0.5% of their max HP for every 75 power you have. Now, each god damaged by hunger provides you with a shield of 1% of your max HP for each 75 power you have. It can't exceed 35% of your max HP. So essentially, if I'm reading that correct, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, the more damage you're doing to them, the more shield you're getting, right?
To a point, yes.
And I think with how strong shields tend to be in Smite, which they have almost forever, you can look at Gap Shield being amazing for years. even now. Shields are valued very highly in Smite. And I think if this ever gets buffed, this will be broken.
I don't think it's going to be buffed because I say they're going to walk. They're walking a thin line right now because there's so many different points to this. Because it's every 15 seconds gain a stack. And then you have to cast an ability, which you only have 3 of in an X amount of cooldown. It deals bonus damage of 5% of their health for each 75% power, for each 75 magical damage you have. Then each god you damage, you get a shield 1% of your max HP for each 75% damage you have. So realistically, it's not going to be a very big shield unless you have a lot of power.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you go full power and get Bancroft's Claw, you could be very strong.
You could be very strong in a game that lasts, 30 to 40 minutes, but I don't think it's going to be a problem in most 20-minute games. I would say 20, 25 minutes is the average.
Actually, now that you said it again, reading it, it's each 75. So each instance of 75 magical power you have.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's only
It
1%
feels like
of your max HP, though, and anyone building this isn't going to have a very high HP, so you're not going to have a very high shield.
Right, but I'm saying I don't think you're going to even get that many instances of that, because...
No, that's what I'm saying. I think you're overestimating how big this shield is going to be. Yeah, shields are good, but I think you're overestimating just how big it can get.
I might be.
I could be wrong, and it could be totally different execution. Like I said, we've only played 2 or 3 games, so I don't even think I've seen this yet.
We saw Nimble Bancroft's talent yesterday.
Which I feel like that's going to be the popular one.
Anyways, next we have the Executioner tree. Specifically Executioner, again, the glyph treatment. I think this is a good deserving item. We were talking about it yesterday, how it's better for the less popular items in a certain tree to get the glyph treatment, because it's more incentive to buy that or to go into that item now. Because I'd say in this tree, kin size is definitely the most popular item between that Aussie and Executioner. It's just most frequently built, I'd say. But so I think it's a good thing that Executioner is getting the glyph treatment. The heavy Executioner, we'll talk about it. Essentially just a better Executioner. Passive is basic attack against an enemy god. Reduce the target's physical protections by 17.5% for 3 seconds. Max of 2 stacks. However, your attack speed is capped at 1.75. And the other one in the tree is what was getting replaced with Jotun's Cunning was Jotun's Ferocity, which essentially just came over to the Executioner tree, and I think is a much better fit. But I'll read it anyways. Your next basic attack marks an enemy god. If you hit the marked enemy god, or the marked enemy hits you with a basic attack or ability, gain a stack. Each stack provides 2% increased damage towards the marked enemy god, stacking up to 10 times. And that's a lot of stacks, by the way, but it can only occur every 30 seconds. So essentially, same thing as Jotun's Veracity as it was, just in the Executioner tree, which I think is pretty strong. And we have one more in the glyphs department, which is Magi's Cloak, which I think is pretty deserving, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Why don't you take this one?
Okay, so you have 2 options. You have basically the hard defense, which is Magi's Shelter, whenever your passive is consumed. The passive being the... would it be a proc, technically?
Yeah, the passive is whenever
the proc
Magi's Cloak is proc, yeah.
Which I really don't like their wording. I really wish they changed this. But whenever the proc is consumed, the nearest allied god within 25 units gains protection from a single hard CC effect for 5 seconds. If the passive is consumed before the time runs out, they gain 1 second of crowd control immunity. And then they have Magi's Revenge, the first enemy god to hit you with hard crowd control while you are protected becomes marked for revenge for 5 seconds. Gods marked with revenge cause enemy gods within 40 units to move 20% faster towards them and take 10% increased damage.
So what we're basically getting here is Magi's Shelter is Magi's Cloak, but it'll go to an ally that you're close to. I really like the fact that you get 20% faster when you're going towards that enemy, and they take 10% increased damage. I think, again, I said it with another item or glyph already. Movement speed on these types of items is always good because it incentivizes chasing down an enemy or, trying to get out of a fight, something like that. And plus, if you're taking 10% increased damage while you're on the run, it gives you so much incentive to chase that person down, even if you're like the last one alive on your team. And now we get into the new masks, which are back. If you remember any of them, they are essentially the same thing, but they are now starter items with the other starter items.
Yeah.
And I'll just graze by these real quick because, like I said, they are almost exactly the same. But I do think it's overall much better that they are a starter item because if you were going to build a mask, you did it in the beginning. We saw this a season or two ago in the solo lane, where solos would go the fighter's mask for the damage increase, and I mean it worked decently well. So I think the fact that they're starter items makes it a lot better. But yep, we still have Protector's Mask, only purchasable by mages, assassins, and hunters. Obviously, it will decrease your damage dealt, but it will make you a bit tankier. We have Lono's Mask as the upgrade, just a much better version. Then we have Fighter's Mask, which is only purchasable by warriors and guardians, which obviously gives you more power in exchange for your tankiness. But yes, the masks are back. If you liked them before, I think you'll actually like them more this time. Which brings us to the new item tree in Smite for the mid-season, which is always interesting because, like you said earlier, so I think I'll have you talk about it.
So the new item tree is essentially, it's a very big tree actually. It's the biggest one they've
actually pretty big,
introduced in a while. So we're gonna go by tiers. Tier 1 is mystical earrings, 400 gold. Nothing special. Then we go into
1500
tier
gold, yeah.
2 where it starts branching off. We have gleaming ear cuffs, we have jeweled studs, and we have rose spike earrings. Now, gleaming ear cuffs is pretty much just power. You upgrade gleaming ear cuffs into griffin wing earrings, which stats are 40 physical power, 60 magical power, 25% attack speed, and 15 mana per 5. Basic attack projectile speed increased by 40%. Basic attack damage reduced by 15%. So this is kind of a give and take. It's kind of an alternative to bows, really.
Which I already stated and is on record of saying, which will be strong.
Yep.
But I think what makes this item super interesting is, we'll just read that first bullet point again. Basic attack projectile speed is increased by 40%, not your attack speed. It's very different.
Yes.
However, I already know from watching other videos on the item and playing a game or two yesterday, this is a super polarizing item because either I'm seeing some people defending this item with their life, or others saying that this is worse than every other item that just is attack speed because it has 25%, the same as like Aussie perhaps. And I saw a video side by side, and I could not tell the difference between the 40% increased projectile speed. I feel like it could be different if the attack speed was lower. Maybe if we could see it then, but as it stands, this item is very polarizing to the audience
and
already.
I think they're just adding in extra things at this point. It's like, why? Just get rid of the projectile bullshit and increase overall attack speed by like 15%. Stop adding in new stats and new shit. Just stick with the ones you got.
I kind of agree, yeah.
You're taking in too many factors, and it's becoming a problem for your fucking code, as you can tell by the line of freaking code errors. So the next item in tier 2 is jeweled studs. Pretty much 30 physical power, 50 magical, 10% cooldown, and 20 mana per 5, which builds into Sphinx's baubles, which gives 55 physical power, 80 magical power, 10% cooldown, and a 30% mana per 5, with the passive's cooldown reduction cap increased from 40 to 60%, which is huge. Ability damage dealt decreased by 20%, and ability healing decreased by 20%. So it's kind of, I don't
If you're a
know.
cooldown god that needs the cooldown, you'll be building it.
I don't
But
know
I
though.
don't know if the 20%
I don't know if
healing
it's
decrease in
worth.
damage cell is worth it.
I feel like the healing is not a huge issue. I mean,
Well,
it's
yeah, because most gods don't heal.
most magical ADCs typically do build a good chunk of lifesteal. I
Well, that's
don't know
magical
yet.
ADCs. They don't have any natural healing in their kit. And if they do, it's very little. Because if you're building this Sphinx's Babbles,
Bobble.
what Bobble, whatever, you're building for the cooldown. Again, that
Yeah,
to
it's
increase your
just
cap from 40 to 60, like you said, that is pretty big for
yeah.
certain
I
these
just
mages.
I just don't know. I'll probably actually this is probably one of the trees that I'll do some extensive testing with Oleron with at some point just because I'm curious, but I just don't know. I'll have to I might make a follow up on this depending on how I feel about it. But right now I'm very the Griffin ring earrings and Sphinx's baubles. I'm both very kind of in between right now, and I'm not sure whether or not they're gonna be good or just another item that no one builds.
And we have 2 more items.
Well, we have the rose spike earrings, which builds into the remaining tier 3, which is pretty much just an average blah item. It gives 200 health and 15 health per 5 and 15 mana per 5, which can either go into Mana Core spikes, which gives 350 health, 30 health per 5, 20 mana per 5, and 20% cooldown with a passive when you hit an enemy god with hard crowd control. They drop a spike on the ground. When you or an ally pick up the spike, they gain a buff that causes their next ability to deal bonus damage equal to 3% of their max HP. This effect is doubled if you are the one who picks up the spike. Spikes last 7 seconds on the ground, cannot stack. Picking up another spike when you have the buff refreshes the duration. So this is going to be, in my opinion, huge for support. But this item is going to be huge for support, especially on someone with very high, maybe building into one of the attack speed.
It's going to be amazing for the aggressive supports.
But yeah. Then the last one is Fabulous Hoops, 300 health, 20 health per 5, and 40 mana per 5. Each time an allied god dies within 70 units of you, or you heal an allied god with an ability, a flower drops for your ally that can be picked up by you or the allied god. Picking up a flower gives that god a shield equal to 7.5% of their max HP. This item does not stack. New shield refreshes duration. So this is like probably going to be the new go-to item for the Sylvanuses and the Yamosias and the healing guardians of the world. Any really hard healer that goes support is going to build this item because it's just good. It just gives you an extra shield and it has a great mana per 5.
I see Mana Core Spike being the best in this tree. I think because sometimes you'll look at these stats like 300 HP, 30 HP5, 20 MP5. And I know you said it, I'm just going to correct you real quick. You said 20% cooldown. It's actually 20% crowd control reduction.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, that is big because 20% cooldown would be better, personally. Yep. But now we're going to move on to the actual item balance.
Yeah, I'm just going to breeze through some of these because a lot of these do not matter. So Brawler's Beatstick, decreased anti-heal debuff from 6 seconds to 5 seconds, which is just good. Divine Rune, decreased anti-heal debuff from 6 seconds to 5 seconds, decreased anti-heal debuff duration 6 to 5 seconds on Toxic Blade. So those 3 items just decrease the speed.
This goes hand in hand with the brawling mechanic that they did. Yeah.
Bumba's hammer is basically a new item.
Sure is.
Bumba's hammer now is 50% physical power, 70 magical power, 150 health, 10% cooldown reduction, and then the passive is the same, correct? Okay, it's a little different.
So the original was after casting an ability, your next basic attack deals 80 true damage. It still does that. However, the next part is different. After hitting a basic attack, empowered by Bumba's hammer, your active non-ultimate cooldowns are reduced by 1 second, and you are healed for 120 health. The old passive, where it was only 5% of your max health.
Amulet of Stronghold, increased conversion rate of passive from 10% to 15. Amulet of Silence reduced internal cooldown of silence from 45 seconds to 30 seconds. Sentinel's Gift increased bonus gold per trigger from 7 to 8. Sentinel's Embrace added 6 gold per 5 seconds. Relic Dagger increased relic cooldown from 30 seconds to 40 seconds. Tyrannical Plate Helm increased minion buff from 20% health and attack speed to 25%. Mail of Renewal increased physical and magical protections from 20 to 30. Sledge increased CCR from 20 to 30%. Shield of Regrowth passive now adds 15% power and 30% magical power for a 4-second buff duration, which honestly just makes that item so much better for healers.
Well, it's not percent. It's just 15
yes,
30
15 and 30. Celestial Legion Helm add 4% crit damage reduction per stack. And then next we're going to do the two items that I think have the most in-depth change. Pythagorean's Peace removed 10% magical penetration to add 10% cooldown reduction and increased the health from 200 to 250, which really does just change how the item works.
Yeah, you tell me. I don't build this item ever. How do you think this will be?
I don't build it much anymore, but I feel like most people are going to like this a little bit more, because chances are if you're building Pythagorean's Peace, you're building additional pen anyway. But,
yeah, I would say that makes sense.
And most people build Pythagorean's Peace early game, so I would say cooldown reduction is good early game more than anything. So we'll see, though. And then Staff of Mirrodin, the old passive has been replaced with when your ultimate ability has finished casting, you gain Mirrodin's Rage, which provides 25% increased damage dealt, decaying to 2.5% increased damage dealt over 8 seconds. At the end of the 8 seconds, you lose Rage, and it can only occur every 45 seconds. A little bit better, but not...
Yeah, so I was wondering where it went. The old passive of Staff of Mirrodin went to Sphinx's Babbles with the cap increase. Okay, that makes sense, because I realized reading Sphinx's Babble that it sounded like old Staff of Mirrodin. I think it is because it is.
And now the last thing that really has to do with items is all support items, including Sentinel's Embrace, Sentinel's Boon, Compassion, Animosity, Spartan Flag, War Banner, and Lono's Mask can be upgraded at level 15 now.
Yeah, we can both agree this is amazing. And I think with the increases to these items, you know, even going up to Amulet of the Stronghold, Amulet of Silence, Sentinel's Gift, Sentinel's Embrace, Tyrannical Playhelm, Mail of Renewal, Shield of Regrowth. All of these items that you build on a tank are much better. And the fact that you can even upgrade these starters at 15 as opposed to 17, so much better, because support is typically always behind by 2 or 3, maybe even 4 levels.
Unless I'm playing Atlas and then I'm the highest level in the game.
So for relics, we got Bracer of Illumination getting a buff. It now lasts from 8 seconds to 12 seconds now. So definitely a better. I don't think many people typically build the item, but it'll be good for the people that do, so it doesn't really matter. And now these next two I think are actually amazing. Drowned Ankh is getting an increase to its miasma damage from 2% of current HP to 4% of current HP. I always felt like that 2% current HP damage when they healed just wasn't doing much. Now I believe that 4% is good on these healers, much better than the 2%. And even then, I still believe we should move the 4% up to like 5, maybe even 6%. I just think healers sometimes can get out of hand, and they kind of hurt the meta, in my opinion. But next would be Cloak of the Avatar. And this is a weird one. It's hard to calculate, but it's okay. It will increase the knockback strength by 33% when you proc it. Essentially, just making that push away from the Cloak of the Avatar much stronger. They go up higher and they go back further. It's a weird one to calculate, but I kind of did feel the difference when I used it yesterday in my games. Next would be Chaotic Beads. They're changing the passive from 7% current health as magical damage to 5 current. Health is true damage. It just makes a lot more sense. Chaotic Beads was kind of doing a bit too much damage, so they just tuning that one down a little bit. Next, we have Emblem of Trembling Terror, which we didn't see a whole lot of because I think the requirement to get the Tremble was terrible, being 30 max HP, is now going down to 15. And I think that'll make it a much more interesting option in the Emblem of Horror tree. A lot more people would probably pick this up because it's, 30% down to 15%. That's a big decrease, which is good. Next, we have Sunder and Blast. They fixed a bug where incorrect Sunder icon was being used to represent cooldown. That could be confusing for sure. But what they did do is they increased target's damage taken from 5% to 7.5. So Sunder is going to wear those tanks down much faster, which I love. I stand by the Sunder tree of upgrades. I definitely think we should be using Sunder more, especially now that it got 2 charges a season or 2 ago. And maybe it was the season they got 2 charges, but I think Sunder and Blast and Siphon and Sunder should be used more, and I definitely see it as a lot more value. And the last one we got here is Thorns of Overgrowth. Increasing the radius of the passive from 55 units to 70 units. Now, I love myself some Thorns, and I think when you increase the passive from 55 units to 70 units, it's just much better. I'm a Thorns lover, so this will make the tanks just a bit better. Which leads us into diminishing returns.
Okay, so diminishing returns has been a mechanic in Smite from a very long time. And it's a little bit hard to explain, so I'm going to do my best to make it in sense that makes sense. Diminishing returns is a previously invisible system that helps players who receive multiple forms of crowd control. And I say previously invisible because in this effect, it now will be given an official icon on the buff and debuff bar. Now, this comes with a lot of changes to the mechanic and crowd control as a whole, which added in with all these new items and changes makes sense why everything has changed so much. So the new effects of diminishing returns will be max stack count increased from 2 to 4. Stacks of diminishing returns last for 15 seconds, and this duration is refreshed every stack. So every time you're hit with CC, it starts from 15 again. CCR per stack decreased from 40% to 20%, which really doesn't change anything because it doubled the stack. So really it just takes longer to get to the max reduction. Diminishing returns can no longer be applied to yourself or allies. So now it's just purely through the game. You can't affect it. And then they fixed many code-driven errors that previously did not apply, which goes back into what I was saying earlier about having so many mechanics that it's starting to affect their code. Now, with this diminishing returns adjustment, they are doing a major overhaul to crowd control. So now, hard CC is now defined as any crowd control that makes it impossible to do at least one of the following actions: basic attack, non-movement abilities, and movement inputs. Hard crowd control apply 1 stack of DR, which is diminishing returns, and their durations are affected by the number of DR stacks a player has. Root is now considered a hard CC, which makes a lot of sense. Which my opinion it should have always been, but
yeah.
Okay, then there is true CC, a new subclassification of hard CC defined as hard CCs that are not affected by diminishing returns, such as true hard CCs apply 2 stacks of DR. So really, these are considered more CC than hard CC. And these actions will include banishes, grabs, knockbacks, knock-ups, polymorphs, and pulls. So you now get 2 stacks of DR every time you're hit with one of those. Now, soft CCs are now defined as any crowd control that makes it more difficult to do a specific action, including basic attacks, non-movement abilities, movement inputs. Soft CCs neither apply nor are affected by stacks of DR. Intoxicate and Trembles are now considered soft CCs. Basically, they've changed the whole crowd control, which I don't necessarily hate.
It's a good change. I think in the long run for
It's gonna definitely take a little getting used to, because it's been basically the same for, years and years, but I think this is a good thing, especially with all the gods now that are being introduced, that almost every god now has some form of CC.
Yeah, at least every new god has one form of CC.
Yeah, there are a few known issues with a few gods, but that'll be fixed in the coming patches, so I'm not even going to delve into that because it's a long list.
Right, and I think this goes hand in hand with why they're doing 2 bonus patch updates.
Because this is a lot of mechanics to get right.
Yeah, this with the new glyphs, the whole new item tree, and these god changes, I think they're actually going to need this time to either balance it out or buff certain things. So, and this leads us straight into straight up god balance, which is pretty easy for us to get. It's easy to understand how god balance is. So we're going to start with a buff for Ao Kuang. Dragon King's Sword. Decreased time it takes to gain a stack from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. And Water Illusion as well, increasing the magical power scaling from 60% to 70%. Just a bit more damage. Next would be Cerberus. Spear of Death. Increase the healing reduction applied to nearby enemies from 20% to 25%, which is good because he's just the anti-heal. Take their heal away from them type of guardian. And Paralyzing Spit, increase base damage from 40 to 160 to 50 to 170. That's a revert. I think they understood that they kind of nerfed that ability's damage a bit too low. Next would be Cupid. Heart Bomb is getting an increase to its damage done to minions from 50% to 60 on both the initial hit and explosion. I can tell you this from personal experience. I felt this on Cupid yesterday. I felt that Heart Bomb was doing a lot more damage to the minions for sure. And also gain a buff to Share the Love, increasing the base heal per heart from 30 to 110 now to 40 to 140. So that higher end, and basically through all the leveling, he's going to be doing a bit more healing for your team, which is amazing. Next, we have Discordia with an increased damage from first Force Strife, I should say, increased damage from 60 to 220, now from 80 to 240. Giving her a bit of boost in power, which I think she does need. And Erratic Behavior, which I believe is her dash, right? Is that not what that is?
What is it?
Erotic Behavior. I believe it's her little leap.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, yeah, that's getting decreased from 60 seconds to 15. Because yes, 1 second.
And it's not erotic, it's erratic.
Did I say erotic?
Yep.
Oh boy. Hera is getting a change to Command and Presence. Is now getting an increased cooldown reduction on Argus from 1 second to 1.5. And increase in cooldown reduction on Command and Presence from 0.33 to 0.5 seconds. Next will be Hercules. Driving Strike, decreased cooldown from 14 to 13 seconds. Earthbreaker, decreased cooldown from 14 to 12 seconds to 13 to 11. This is amazing for Herc, because he is always having to build cooldown, like always. He probably still will, but this will be better for his cooldown, for sure. Hoombots, not the buff I'm looking for, but it's Hoombots is now knock up and knockback immune while channeling this ability, which is Overhand Smash, his big cone damaging ability. And also increasing the base damage from 75 to 290 to 85 to 305. So this will actually be doing a decent amount, what am I trying to say? A decent amount of damage more. Next is Nike. Ren is getting a cooldown decrease from 14 at all ranks to 14 down to 12 seconds. I think that's way better than just always being at 14, helping with that cooldown. And barrier formation is getting an increase in damage from 70 to 310 to 80 to 320, which I did not know barrier formation did that much. That's kind of crazy. Next is Pele. Pyro class is increasing the return damage from 20 per shard to 30 per shard, just making that probably more consistent. And I think this one is very interesting. Serket is getting yet again another buff. They've been buffing Serket like crazy. Deathbane is getting an increase from its base damage from 50 to 122 back to 50 to 130, which is a revert. So they're making the higher end of Deathbane a bit more, which it was. But what they're doing big on her ult, Last Breath, is increasing the damage mitigation from 35% to 50%. Now, I'm a little worried this is going to push her back into sort of the true damage area where she can build a bit more tanky. I know they're trying to like get rid of that, but when you're increasing her damage mitigation on her ult from 35 to 50, that's kind of a big increase. Next would be Ares. Shackles now deals 40% extra damage to jungle monsters, which is good because Ares does like nothing to jungle. Danzaburo is getting the same treatment with his Allure and Spirits, and same with the Morgan, also dealing 30% extra damage to jungle monsters with deadly aspects, which makes sense. They felt a little lackluster. And now we have a bit of a switch up. We have Chang'e getting an increase to her base HP from 574 to 650, increasing her base HP per level from 84 to 88, and total health at level 20 from 2254 to 2410. Overall, just making Chang'e a bit more tanky later on in the game and making her be more available in these fights with a bit more HP. Thor gets a buff to Mjolnir's attunement, with minions now take 100% damage from the return swing. Obviously big on Thor. And our last god in the god balance is Zhang Kui, in just a general buff, increasing his base physical protections from 11.2 to 15.2, so he will be a bit more tanky. There's going to be a new mechanic in Smite called non-conquest balance, and there's going to be a new in-game icon. I saw it yesterday. I didn't quite get it. But essentially now they're going to be splitting up the conquest changes to gods, and the rest of the other game modes are going to be completely separate, which I think makes a lot more sense because you have to think certain gods and certain modes are way stronger or way less effective than they would be in conquest or otherwise. So now it's going to be like a blanket covering every other mode in Smite that is not conquest. So, for example, Apwash is the first one here on this list that's going to be receiving some of these changes. He's now going to be doing minus 5% damage to gods, 10% less to damage and minions. He's going to get a 5% non-ult cooldown increase and a 10% ultimate cooldown increase.
Okay.
That's how they're going to be doing these. So they're just straight percent increases or decreases. They have some with Artemis, Ares, Khepri, Zeus, Aokwang, Arachne, Baka, and a few others, right? They're just doing a broad blanket cover to where it makes certain gods better or certain gods worse in other modes. It's a very bland thing, but I think overall it will be better. It just will take some time to understand and get used to. Like, oh, your god probably isn't as good as he was in Conquest or as good as he was in like a slasher or arena. Pretty simple to understand if you ask me. It's just a little confusing at first, that's all.
It's
So,
simple,
like,
and I'll
Zeus
tell you why
doing
I
10%
dislike
less
it.
damage. Go.
So the main problem that I have with this is, at least for me, you could be completely different, but personally, I never use jungle practice. I know you do quite a lot, but I don't
Yeah.
feel that jungle practice gives you a good base understanding of how a god works. I will always play a god before I play them in Conquest in an arena, joust, slash, assault. Well, not really assault, but some other game mode. But now that some of these gods' stats and abilities are changing based on modes, it changes how the game is going to be played. And just because I build a god a certain way in Joust, maybe I don't build it the same way in Conquest. Now these changes, because basically what they're doing is they're trying to make every god on a level playing field, which in my opinion is because it's lazy game balancing. I think that you have focused on Conquest so long that you should keep focusing on Conquest and have these other game modes as add-ons, or you should say we're just going to have to balance for the whole game as a whole. I think you should pick one because I think this is stupid personally. I understand it, but I disagree with it, and I think it's lazy and honestly just a bad decision.
How is it lazy?
Okay, we'll take League of Legend for example. League of Legend
Okay.
has the quote unquote conquest mode, and that's it. Now, Smite has extra modes. You don't necessarily need these extra modes. This is just add-ons for the game, but not something that I would never consider Joust, Arena, Slash to be as important as Conquest. Do you disagree?
I would say they all deserve their spot because they've been around for so long in Smite's history, but I
Then
do agree with you.
if you
Yes,
agree
that
with that,
Conquest is
then
biggest.
I think you should say that you should be balancing gods based on all modes and not just doing a cop out of buffing or nerfing certain gods per specific modes. And that's just how I feel. I know that will probably be the unpopular opinion, but I just feel that it's lazy and not the way that you should be going about things, is changing certain gods to be better in certain modes or worse in certain modes.
I mean, like you just said, that probably will be the unpopular opinion, but like I said, this will be a time will tell situation, and obviously not the biggest thing in the patch.
No,
Like I'm gonna read some of these numbers again. 10% damage to minions, or it's like it's small percentages. Like I feel
it
like we
is.
won't even feel it, to be
It's
honest.
small percentages, but by that argument, why the fuck are you even doing it if you're not going to notice the difference? So obviously their intention is to make you notice the difference, and if not, then you're just wasting your time, and they're wasting their time that they could be putting into other things.
I mean, okay, when you put it that way, it does kind of make sense. I see what you're saying now, and I think I'm on your side now then. Because, yeah, if they are not, I see what you mean, 100% now. If they're going to be implementing this thing where they want people to notice a difference, then make these numbers like 20%,
Yeah,
30% less.
and at
Like, I
that
get
point,
that.
make the god nerf or buff the god. If it's getting that high up to where you have to make numbers in the 20s to 30s, then nerf or buff the god. If you want your game to focus on multiple game modes, then you need to make all the gods viable in all the modes. Or you focus on the one mode and say these modes are just extra fun modes. They're not as balanced, but enjoy them. Don't take them too seriously.
Fair enough. Yeah, I get what you're saying for sure. And now, just lastly, before we end this episode, I just want to go over a brief overview of what's coming in the patch. The new tier 4s again, Jotun's Cunning, going to be great for junglers. Perfected Rod of Tahuti, going to be good for mage ADCs and more ability focused gods. Nimble, Bancroft's Talon, and Bancroft's Claw, going to be great for, again, mage ADCs, other gods that build lifesteal, maybe even some guardians, I'm sure. Executioner, again, some glyphs, which are, I just think, fit perfectly. Magi's Cloak, obviously being a better option and alternative to others. We have the masks coming back as starter items, which are good. We obviously have the whole new item tree. I think this is the biggest thing in the update, if I'm being honest. Because that is 4 different tier 3 items to experiment with, being Fey Blessed Hoops, Manicore Spikes, Sphinx's Babbles, and Griffin Wing Earrings. I think some of them make a lot of sense, like Manicore Spike and Phase Blessing. However, I don't know how Sphinx Babbles and especially Griffin Wing Earrings are going to pan out. I see them very polarizing already. A nerf to the anti-heal. Boomba gets a new passive, making you heal perhaps a bit more. Tanks get a big buff. Also being available, all their starter items to be upgraded at level 15 as opposed to 17. Being a massive buff for the conquest changes. Obviously, most of these items, good buffs. I don't think many items were actually nerfed in this. Some relics are okay. Cloak of the Avatar is my favorite buff here. 30% strength on a knockback. That's pretty good. Thunder and Blast actually being a decent increase from 5% to 7.5. DR changes, good for the long term, but it's going to take some time getting used to. And I think some good God balance upgrades, like Hercules getting a buff, Cupid, Ao Kuang, among others. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I think a bunch of these. I overall believe that this is going to be a good patch.
I think it's going to be in the long run good, but it's gonna be interesting to see.
Obviously, the new Nickelodeon event too.
Well, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that's everything. That's all of our thoughts on everything. And it's overall, like I said, pretty good. I think obviously the biggest being the new glyphs and the new item tree being the biggest. But yeah, that has been this episode of the FridgeCast, everybody. If you like the video, feel free to like and subscribe. But that is the end of this episode. Bye, guys.